This is the newspaper headlines and analysis segment of Daybreak Live, where we check the stories that are making the rounds across the country, Nigeria, spotlighting the event, the high point, the low point, and sometimes the midpoint, because we all must meet at a midpoint. That's exactly how we're going to have the stories today. I have so many prints this morning. If you didn't have a newspaper this morning, you've not checked the news, don't you worry. We've got you covered on this dial. Just stay tuned and stay glued to Dominion Television, because right on the print this morning, the papers are heavy. For me, you can tell why. Many stories, especially Kayode Egbetokun, making the front pages of several newspapers this morning. That story. I'll start with Nigerian Tribune newspaper, and right there, Egbetokun resigns. Tunji Disu is acting IGP. 8 DIGs may go. That's exactly what I said when I said there's a chance that one appointment might lead to dismissal of many other people, and that's exactly as you can see on your screen. Egbetokun resigns. Tunji Disu is acting IGP. 8 DIGs may go. That's on page 3 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper this morning. But what led to that? How did that come about? Especially now, there's so much conversations around that particular situation. When it broke yesterday, it was trending on Google, and every trend that you can find, it was a big deal, and it's still a big deal, because the question would arise from why now? There's been claims about last year that the IGP's tenure shall have been over. But according to the Constitution or the Police Act, you can find that, of course, it's supposed to have like a 4-year tenure run, provided the president allows for that. Because the president, according to Constitution, I think section 15, subsection 1 as well, has a right, 315 year, has a right to appoint the IGP, and then he did that in June of 2023. So it is not 4 years yet. That's the conversation right from some quarters. But there's been claims about his age and retirement as well. That's also a thing to discuss. There are legal implications to this, and a lot of conversations have emanated from the legal angle to say, and maybe of course social works angle as well, to say if he's at 60 or he has served for 35 years, then he should retire humbly. And some are saying that's exactly the point why. Of course, there are people like Shiwore who would not agree with Kayode Egbetokun on many grounds, but that's exactly the situation. He has resigned, and it seems like Disu is going to take over. So DIGs might need to go, and that's exactly. We'll know why in the course of time. The presidency has released something about that as well. They said there was a mutual and a consensual agreement between the president and the IGP when they had a meeting in Abuja to say, you know what, I have family reasons, I have family issues to attend to, and that's also something of importance to him at the time. But there are questions about, could there be an undertone, political undertone, or something else that we are not seeing on the surface? Maybe there's a subsurface conversation right there that we need to know. But all of this will keep tabs on and keep our fingers crossed to see what becomes of that story, because we need the security apparatus in the country to be, to be above and beyond, to go the extra mile, especially the elections are fast approaching. And that's one of the importance of having a security that is stable, constitutionally stable, systematically and strategically stable, because that's the conversation right there. But I don't want to belabor that issue just too much. Many other stories are still making the rounds. Now, federal government files fresh charges against Ozekume. While we thought there was maybe they were going to forgive the case, it seems like they are revisiting the case. So Ozekume and the federal government are still, of course, the SGF, that's George Akume, said something just a few days ago, and now there seems to be an outcome of event for that particular case. We'll keep tabs on that as well and get you abreast as it breaks much further from that scene. Now, Bayelsa Assembly clears Diri's chief of staff as deputy governor. That's also making the rounds in Bayelsa as we speak. Yesterday was a conversation, and still is, as we also track it much further. Again, fire destroyed NIMET's equipment at MMIA terminal. That's coming from Keyamo. Festus Keyamo is saying that according to the report this morning. Suspected thugs attacked Edo ADC Secretariat Odigye Oyegun's residence minutes after Apata's defection. That's a story on page 10 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. As you can see this morning, ex-APC national chairman links attacks to threat on Obi. Edo APC denies involvement. That is something to check about. Who is involved? Who called the shots? Who gave the order? That's what Nigerians are expecting to know. If you say there was, because you can't say a faceless group of people came to maybe apprehend or shoot at somebody, there has to be a motive behind it. There's nothing that goes without a cause. There's no consequence if there's no action. So for every cause, there's an action. There's cause and effect principle in life. So if you say it happened, how did it happen? Why did it happen? Who sponsored it? Who gave the order? Those are the questions on the table to answer for everybody that is concerned in that state as we speak. Now, moving on from that now, El Rufai asked court to quash DSS charges against him. Atiku wants over his health. While we are yet to charge him to court, that's coming from the FCC as well. Nigerian Tribune has that story. But for one of time, I will switch focus now to Vanguard newspaper to see what's vanguarding on Vanguard newspapers. Talking of that story, it's about Obi and Oyegun. How we escaped assassination in Benin is the story to look out for. A narrow escape. That's the way Vanguard has put it this morning. Vanguard newspaper has it that how we escaped assassination in Benin. That is a big one coming from Obi and Oyegun this morning. Moving on from that story, CBN cuts interest rate to 26.5%. That's from 27%. So there are conversations about this. What does this reflect? What does this mean? Yesterday there was a meeting involving the president, the vice president, and then there were conversations about the country is getting better because there are a lot of reforms that are helping, the policies that are restructuring the business or the commerce sector of the country. And there was a promise yesterday by the vice president, Kashim Shettima. Yesterday, he said categorically that before the end of the year, $1 might sell for 1,000 naira, and that would be a development if you agree with me, considering what we've had in the past. So that's exactly the promise of the vice president, and he was telling he was telling some of his friends who have hoarded the US dollars just to make profit. He told them that if you don't start doing something like selling it out now, you might be at loss. You might run at loss because this administration is not waiting. It's doing a lot to ensure that Nigerian naira will be at par or possibly will still gain, significantly against the US dollars. But that is only a word, except it turns into reality. And of course, fingers will be crossed, hearts will be palpitating, eyes will be on the lock and key on the president. Maybe not the president, this present administration generally. That is one of the conversations we're having from that quarters. Now, U.S. Congress recommends measures to end Christian persecution in Nigeria. Also on Vanguard newspaper, something of interest to many persons yesterday. There was a U.S. Congress summit and then a report that was sent to the president by the U.S. Congress just yesterday broke out, and then they said there are a lot of things that are inside our report. I mean, so many things to discuss, but some of the high points from that is calls for legal reforms, improved policing, strengthening of criminal justice sector. That's one of the reforms from that particular recommendation about Christian persecution in Nigeria. 6, repeal of Sharia blasphemy laws. That is also a conversation that has really sparked interest, especially in the northern region of this country. Many people are saying you don't have a right to poke nose into what we do, especially the laws that are guiding and binding us as a people. There's even claims before now that Sharia law was supposed to be recommended for some other southwest states. Some have said they agree, others have said they do not agree. There's been counter argument and argument for and against that particular decision. Now the US is seeking a way to end Sharia law. Yeah, I mean, that's also one of the things, because we've talked about the bilateral arrangements between Nigeria and a host of nations. For example, Turkey, example, the British government, the United States, Saudi Arabia, and so many other countries. So Nigeria is at the midst of these people, and that is where the question is. If you have to depend on me to get you security, so whatever I say might stand, whatever I profess to you to say, this is what you should do going forward, might be the case, because you do not have a choice as we speak. So that's also something to consider. Meanwhile, the demand programs to allow self-defense for farmers. Anyway, how will that be? But never say never, because it's something that is a reform, and maybe if there's a bit of technical know-how as to how it should unfold, we might see a positive change from that as well. So never you say never. Moving on from that now. They want audit reports of effectiveness of aid support in Nigeria, and they seek Nigeria's divestment from Russian military measures to counter Chinese influence. U.S. pressure on Sharia can cause tension in Nigeria, and that's coming from the Christian Association of Nigeria. As you can see right now, the Christian Association of Nigeria is saying, yeah, the pressure on Sharia can cause tension in Nigeria. That is an that's also on the front burner of conversations this morning. No policy on religious persecution. Federal government replies U.S. Congress. So the federal government has made the claims now. They've made their claims to say no policy on religious persecution. Federal government replies U.S. Congress. That's something to check out this morning. Meanwhile, Tinubu also said at the meeting yesterday, the Progressives Governors Forum of the Renewed Hope Summit yesterday said elections not won on social media. Maybe this is a warning to a lot of persons who are political or presidential candidates in the country who seek or are seeking to get the appeal of the social media frenzy to be in their favor. The president said it is not won on social media. What does this mean? Perhaps if you have another meaning for it, maybe the president has another as well. President accepts Egbetokun's resignation as IGP, appoints Tunji Disu in acting capacity, and that is also one of the biggest captions right here on the newsprint and news platforms this morning. DSS can't try me over casual remarks on TV. El-Rufai takes court, 6.2 billion naira damages. There seems to be an upward review of El-Rufai's charges against the federal government. Yesterday, yeah, it was about $1 billion damage fine or whatever, and now it's 2 billion. So maybe tomorrow it will be 3 billion naira. El-Rufai is not sleeping, like they say. Don't sleep, collect your money. Maybe he's trying to do that. He's trying to wake up. That's exactly the conversation. But away from the Vanguard newspaper now, talking the Nation newspaper. The Nation has important stories like every other print this morning. Meanwhile, the biggest caption is about the president. President is saying to his team, take our scorecard to grassroots. Yeah, that was one of the biggest conversations they had yesterday. And they said they were imploring governors to take the scorecard to grassroots, but just to say that Renewed Hope ambassadors get marching order to explain government's achievement. They want them not just to be silent. I think some people have of the opinion that this administration is doing so much than it's telling. Some are saying that one of the problems of this administration is that he's not saying so much because he's actually doing quite a number of things, but he's not so vocal about it. Others have said it's not really about that. He's vocal when he wants to be, and he's not vocal when he probably does not want to do that. So, but then that's the conversation. It seems like the president is now taking it seriously to say, you know, governors, take these scorecard to grassroots. Tell the people what has been done. And they revealed out a lot of achievements yesterday about the policy, about some of the things that is happening in the country. And now it's a good way to look at it. Of course, we would not say this. We would not say positive on his side. If you are the present administration, you would not say that you are a bad administration. But some have also said that this is maybe in a way believable because they can see some of these things, you know, resulting into progress for the nation. But that is also another conversation. Federal government is saying U.S. House panels report catalyst for more cooperation. So on the other hand, that is also the conversation. But we'll keep fingers crossed on this about the Nigerian government and the U.S. and how some of their panels Congress report is going to turn out in the country. So we focus more on that story. Banks raised 4.05 trillion naira in recapitalization drive. That is also something to look out for this morning. Banks raised 4.05 trillion naira in recapitalization drive. 20 meet requirement, 13 others on course. MPC cut interest rate to 26.5%. That is also something to look out for this morning. Meanwhile, the Lagos fire, the Murtala Mohammed International Airport story, has it that airlines relocate to temporary terminal. So for people who might want to use the terminal, so there's the update that it has, you know, relocated to a temporary terminal. So before you make a move, if you have to travel or you have to go through MMI, that's the Murtala Mohammed International Airport, you might need to get this information. It's very required for you. Meanwhile, other stories are, you know, government files new charges against Ozekome, and that's also something to see, and we'll keep fingers crossed on this. For one of time, I'll also switch my focus now to Daily Independent. And what do we have there on the front page? It's about 2027 election, but there's a write-up right there. Why 2027 election could see Nigeria's lowest turnout ever. So this is a projection. How true will this be? That's dependent on you, on me, on everybody, because we must take our responsibility seriously. We must do what is our constitutional right to do without fear, without prejudice, with a sound mind, with an informed opinion, and of course with every strength we can. You should exercise your franchise to vote. You should go to polling units, polling booths, and vote, especially if you have the PVC. If you don't have it, I think it's still up for collection in the country. Meanwhile, 20 banks meet new capital. That's on the business side of things. That was the story we took earlier. And condemnations trail attack on Obi ADC chieftain secretariat in Benin. That is also something right there, as you can see on your screen this morning. It says trail attack. Condemnations trail attack on Obi, ADC chieftains and secretariat in Benin. That is something to look out for. Meanwhile, someone is calling Wike. Call Wike to order before it's too late. That's Bode George telling President Tinubu, call Wike to order before it's too late. That's on the top, the down part of Daily Independent, as you can see today. So maybe the question would be, what's Wike doing? Why does he need to be called to order if he's standing in between two parties and he's helping one? Well, that's the claim of some persons, but that's up for debate. Meanwhile, federal government reject claims of ransom to rescue Niger school children. So there's been this conversation as to sometimes when the government says we have rescued school children that were abducted and this is the situation. So a lot of people would ask, how? Because we can't see you parading those perpetrators. We can't see them anywhere. We just know that we see our children. Yes, it's good. We are so happy about this. But what about what went down behind the scenes? Because some have said whatever went down behind the scenes is the reason why we still have these issues continuing in the country. Because if it was that the body language of the federal government was, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and then they take them down, and that will serve as an example to other deterrents that might want to also do that, or that are doing that. They will be afraid that this government is serious, this government is fearful, this government is going to bring us down. So let us just, because there needs to be that body language for them to also know that yes, this government does not appreciate what you're doing and will not take it lightly. It's going to take it, it's going to take it very seriously, and it's going to come for you. So maybe that's the conversation right there. Meanwhile, Tinubu's Order 9 will bridge PIA, impact oil, gas industry. Pengasan is saying that. Meanwhile, the federal government responded just yesterday again to this issue that no, and that's about this SGF, George Akume, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, said it out loud that yes, what we are doing is constitutional. It will not affect oil investment. It not affect some of these other investments, especially the PIE, particularly the impact on oil and gas industry. So Pengasan is making a claim and making a case for itself to say, what the federal government is doing is not constitutional. I mean, while the federal government, on the other hand, is saying, you guys, you are saying, something you are not so sure about. We are so sure of what we are doing. We've done this, and this is constitutional. We are not violating any order. We're not violating any constitution. We are still operating by the Nigerian constitution. That's exactly the conversation right there. But, so much to talk about in that particular story. Meanwhile, 2027 will determine if Nigeria continues forward or retreats backward. And that's coming from APC chairman, Professor Nentawe Yuwantida, saying that as well, that 2027 will determine if Nigeria continues forward or retreats backward. That comes from the APC chairman today. Now, Dangote refinery to supply 65 million liters of petrol daily for domestic consumption. 65 million liters of petrol daily. That is massive, right? They say massive, right? It is massive, because if Dangote is supplying 65 billion liters of petrol daily for domestic consumption, so there's more to go around. There's more to export. There's more to be used by everybody. That is requiring that. So that's a very good one. You might want to argue. Federal government files fresh 12-count charges against Jose Kume over London property. That is also something we've been on for a while now. We'll keep fingers crossed on it as well. Meanwhile, New Telegraph has the way he puts the story, and I would like to tell you how he put it this morning. New Telegraph says, DIGs, senior AIGs to go as Tinubu accept Egbetokun's resignation, names Tunji Disu acting IGP. So this is a story on page 4 and 6. As you can find it on New Telegraph this morning. Something to really consider about why some people why somebody will be appointed and the others will need to go. Why will that happen? But maybe we'll get to see a much further breakdown of that and what it means, especially about the Police Act of, I think, 2020 as well. But all of this we are keeping tabs on to see what will become of many of this. But the story of the IGP is still something that a lot of people are saying, and asking questions about that. Whatever the case is, let's talk about the impact of this on Nigeria as a place we are now. So there's been claims about many of these things happening at this point where security should not even be slack in the country. It says that if it means that there's an important situation or something to talk about, especially with Kayode Egbetokun, it should not come out this way. There should be a way to go about it. So there's been a lot of conversations, but the law is clear, because an Inspector General of Police serves as a statutory 4-year tenure under the Police Act of 2020, like I said, and whether resignation or removal, what matters most is institutional stability, constitutional compliance, and continuity in Nigeria's security reform process. I think we've talked about this and we're still talking about it, and it's a conversation to be had because, Section 215, subsection 1A says that the president has the power to appoint the IGP and by implication remove the IGP, right? So if that's a constitutional given, if constitutional fact and reality, so the political and legal significance is that a resignation suggests that there's no abrupt constitutional crisis. Meanwhile, removal could signal executive dissatisfaction or policy disagreement. So this is the conversation. Was he removed, and that's Kayode Egbetokun, or did he voluntarily say he was going to resign? That's the conversation right there. But whichever case you want to believe, or we have right now, we'll keep fingers crossed and see what the new IGP is about to do, because there are a lot of conversations and counter arguments about the office of the Inspector General of Police being established under Section 214, subsection 1 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And like I mentioned the other time, like the appointment is made by the President under Section 215, subsection 1 of the Nigerian Constitution. However, if tenure specifics are governed by statutes, particularly the Police Act, you must understand that there's also a Police Act aside or outside of the Nigerian Constitution of the 215 subsection 1 and 214 subsection 1 as well of the Nigerian Constitution as we speak. But there's so much to talk about. The IGP does not hold this office forever. One IGP must come and then a 4-year tenure, except in cases where the age limit is coming to bear and then the retirement age as well. Because if he's 60 years, then he might need to retire from service. If he's 35 years in service, he might need to also retire. So that's exactly the case. Why some people are saying he should have retired, he shouldn't be there, there was an extension of 1 year, why should it be so? But all of this, we have seen an end to that. Meanwhile, we're expecting that the new IGP to be, maybe that's Tunji Disu, will really do well by what it takes, because some have said he's got a lot of experience in his bag. There's so much to talk about that as well, but that's also something we would have much more expansive, comprehensive conversation on right on this show after this. But meanwhile, still taking all the stories, APC leaders, governors recommit to advancing Tinubu's Renewed Hope agenda. Also a story right there yesterday, the Renewed Hope summit they had yesterday. There was one of the the talking point of that conversation or that summit was when the Vice President Kashim Shettima was asking particularly, he said it in a very emotional but yet impressive way, because he said he was calling on two people, right? He was calling on two people. He was calling on the governor of Benue State, and was also calling on SGF to also do something about that. And he was begging them, more like he was begging that, please, we need something to be done in your place. They said people should not die in Benue State. And sometimes you might want to ask, why is the Vice President saying that? Because is it left to the powers of the governor to say that security will be so established in his place? Yes, that's the governor's, that's within his prerogative to say he can ensure security in his state. But much more so, the security challenge in the country has gone beyond what states can handle. Because if states could handle it, then we should be calling many states to question. Many governors should now be, I don't want to say behind bars, but they should be questioned now. They should be answering questions to say, if you claim to be the governor and this is happening in your vicinity, how come you were not able to curtail this? How come this is happening every day? So maybe we'll not even have a governor in Borno State. Maybe we'll not have governors in Benue. Maybe we'll not have governors in Plateau and some other place in Jos and all of that, So there's that conversation as to the security the insecurity situation going beyond what governors have capacity to deal with, because we've seen so many times where the president gave orders to the military to step into some states strategically to now help them curtail and curb those insurgencies and all of the ills in that society. So that's exactly the claims right there. Meanwhile, APC governors are saying, you know what, we are solidly behind you, Mr. President, and will do just right by you and by the people of the country. Will that translate into what Nigerians are expecting? Like they say, time will tell. But we'll keep our fingers crossed. That's very important. And we'll still keep calling on the right people to answer the right questions. We'll keep speaking truth to power, regardless of whose ox is God in the country. Now, moving on from that story. Wike stands expelled, can't speak for PDP. That's what they judge. That's also something to check out this morning on that note. But of course, there's many other stories. Meanwhile, the IGP story is going to be on the spotlight once again, but that will be shortly after this break with Oluwayemi Adelakun. Stay with us and don't go nowhere.